becoming increasingly common to refer to the 90s as the era of peak car. It was certainly the golden age of the company car era, as I'm sure we've all seen the famous episode of From A to B, Tales of Modern Motoring, where various paunchy middle-aged sales executives espouse the virtues of their chosen cars.
In particular, there was a chap with a Cavalier GLI. He was talking about a colleague with a Mazda 626. That was a car that was new, it was different to the Fords and the Vauxhalls of the era, and yet it was something you could still have as a fleet car. And that is what this is, and that's what this Rover is. These are fleet cars that are a little bit of a cut above. Moreover, these ones in particular are a cut above. A Xantia exclusive and a Rover 600 GSI.
But while both these cars are indeed something different from your ordinary run-of-the-mill Ford Mondeo or Vauxhall Cavalier, they're also different takes on that concept in themselves. We have the quite traditional and decidedly British Rover 600 and the very French hydropneumatic Citroën Xantia. So it'll be quite an interesting job to find out which one is actually the best. Welcome to the grey soft touch plastic and walnut veneer clad interior of the Rover 600. I said in the introduction that it's a very traditional and British take on the executive car, and of course it is British. Rover is a British company, it was built in a British factory, but of course, as a lot of people know, it's actually a Honda Accord underneath. This is a product of the Honda Rover collaboration. In fact, it's the last product of that collaboration, which began in the early 80s with the Triumph Acclaim, which was a Honda Ballade, went through things like the Rover 800, which was a Honda Legend, and ended up with this. And while a lot of people may have a problem with a Rover that's actually a Honda Accord, if in 1995 you were to draw the ideal executive saloon, is a car that's engineered by Honda and styled and finished by Rover such a bad thing? Rover needed Honda for their skills in production and engineering and quality and design, and Honda still needed Rover to do the less cerebral stuff, the styling and dressing the interior. The 600 isn't the best example of that collaboration, to be honest. This is very much a Honda product that Rover has then tweaked. But you can still sense that this was a cut above a Ford or a Vauxhall or a Peugeot 405. It's easy to forget now, of course, that in the mid-90s, Rover still meant something, as it were. It was still a badge with some cachet and prestige. That had been the whole point in 1986 when British Leyland was rebranded Rover, and they ditched all the other brands and moved the whole business upmarket. And it was very deliberately calculated and designed to produce a very different character and feel than your run-of-the-mill Fords and Vauxhalls as well. This was a car that played on the British Rover angle. You've got the wood and the pleather. Although the Rover 800 Mark II was the car that saw it first, the Rover grille, which aped to the Rover P5 of the 1960s, that was first conceived for the 600. And it helps give it that more prestigious and upmarket look, especially when it's looming in someone else's rearview mirror. It's got that feeling of being really well engineered, which it is. It feels precise and light and tight, all that Honda-y stuff. And that more traditional, approachable, upmarket Rover image, I think, is also one of the keys to understanding this in comparison to the Xantia. The Xantia is, at the end of the day, just a Citroën, and of course don't forget that just as this is a Honda underneath, a Citroën in the 90s is just a Peugeot. And again, a 90s Peugeot is a very good car, but is it prestigious? Is it remarkable? Is it setting you above your colleagues? And Citroën is not a prestigious brand. It wasn't then, it isn't now. Left field, and maybe quite highly regarded as a design, but it's not the sort of thing that really gets the envious looks in the happy eater car parks.
Despite appealing to the same philosophy, the Rover and the Citroën appealed to very different people. The Rover appealed to the Land of Hope and Glory type: walnut, leather, chrome, Daily Telegraph on the passenger seat, and no doubt mock Tudor house. The Citroën appealed to the rather more cerebral types. The Citroën now is a far more appealing looking car than it ever was in the 1990s. You get the sense that everything has been designed to make it into a Citroën. And not only that, but a Citroën that's appealing to the sort of person who would otherwise buy a Mondeo or a Vectra. You don't have to be the sort of person who drives a CX every day to see the brilliance of this car. It appeals to people who value the ride. It appeals to people who want to drive it rather than to show it off. And given that sales reps do between 35 and 40,000 miles every year, to me, that makes this the better choice. On top of that, it's better equipped. Unlike the Rover, I've got heated seats. Unlike the Rover, I've got a hatchback. Or there's an estate option if that's not big enough. Unlike the Rover, fundamentally, I've got a car that's easy to look after. There are scores of Citroën specialists who will be able to do everything from a timing belt to a full suspension overhaul on one of these things. The 600 might be perhaps more conventional, but there aren't the specialists. But where the Citroën scores its real ace over the Rover is here. On the average British B road with bends, the compliance and the turning and the sheer drivability of this chassis is second only to the Peugeot 405. The Rover 600 will not keep up. The Rover 600 will not give anything like the driver enjoyment of a Citroën Xantia. The Xantia's always got your back. The Xantia feels almost sporting. The Citroën Xantia is a far better car than the Rover 600, both as a Repmobile and as a modern classic today.
Okay, so we have driven both of these 90s Repmobiles, and I think it's pretty clear that the Rover that is actually a Honda is the car that any aspirational executive of 1996 would want.
Is it?
Certainly much more than a Citroën that's actually a Peugeot.
See, the thing is, on the face of it, you could be right, because back in 1996, that would have been a far more appealing car to look at. However, as a classic, I think it's out of its depth compared to the Citroën. The problem is, with this Rover, Jack, as you well know, it's a bit like Detective Pikachu. It's Japanese, but it's got a hat on, and so we're meant to think it's British. It's Japanese, it lacks character.
If it was a Honda, it would lack character, but the whole point is that the Rover adds the character to what is otherwise a rather bland Honda base.
I'm sorry, this is a Honda in a posh frock. The Citroën has charm in spades. A far better ride than the Rover. Today, it looks better than the Rover, even if it might not have done new. And as a car to run today, it's going to be far, far easier.
But Sam, isn't charm just a way of explaining cars' faults? Isn't that what we're often accused of in the classic car world? That you say a car's got character and charm, it's actually the one that you wouldn't want to live with every day because that just means it breaks down.
Mr. Grover.
Mr. Skelton.
Look into that camera just there. Would you like to tell the ladies and gentlemen at home what your everyday car is?
Do I have to?
Yes.
It is a Citroën Xantia, a diesel.
So it's not a Rover 600 then?
Is not, no. In my defence,
There is no defence.
There is a defence, Sam. I can say I think the 600 is the better car, but self-evidently, it's not the one I would buy.